Welcome back, everybody, to the Oracle Investment Club, or Tesla Weekly with Tim and Vin. Episode 8 we're on already. How you doing today,
Yes.
Tim?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Pretty good. We definitely have a lot to talk about. All this
Yeah.
Twitter stuff going on, and then Elon Musk gave a really good, really interesting TED Talk today. Touched on a lot of stuff from just AI and just people having no idea how big this is going to be, bigger than the car segment for Tesla. Very exciting stuff there, but I guess we have to address the elephant in the room with all this Twitter stuff going on. It's been absolutely wild, and a lot of people definitely think that there's other intentions. That if he's doing it, Elon's trying to buy Twitter. I'm sure you've already heard. If he's doing it for monetary intentions, no, it's purely about free speech. Like, it's very important to Elon, and he's referred to Twitter as the de facto public town square. That's just the way it is in 2022 now, unfortunately. And so he sees a problem with free speech and democracy. This is definitely not about the money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because him announcing it right before his TED Talk, I almost wonder if either A, he wanted to talk about it on there, or if he had done it because he wanted to detract from some other things that maybe they were going to talk about. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, he even specifically said that this has nothing to do with monetary gain at all. It strictly has to do with free speech and the future of democracy to be actually free and better for humanity in the future.
Yeah, I've definitely been reading a lot of interesting posts on it. And, I was just thinking about, like, the whole thing with the free speech. Quick rant is, like, the only solution to speech you don't like is having more speech. I mean, freedom of speech, open dialogue, discourse, debate things, but, it's better to allow everyone to have the free speech so that they can spout whatever crazy ideas they have in the public town square, where more level heads will prevail. They step in, say, actually, this is not true. Here are the facts, have a debate. Because the alternative of what these platforms like Twitter have done, you shun, censor, shadow ban half the population. And what happens? They've gone into a deeper, darker place on other platforms where they're now in a literal echo chamber. Everyone's just spouting these crazy ideas, makes the problem 10 times worse. So it's like, it's going to happen either way. But if you allow it in that public town square, exercising that free speech right we're supposed to have, it'll be debated and ultimately proven right or wrong. But you keep shadow banning people, you just add fuel to the fire. Then they just say, of course the media is censoring this, they don't want the truth out. And that's how we get to where we are, to people thinking there's lizard people and people eating babies and whatever else.
Yeah. And I mean, and you think about it, you think about a lot of times children who come from strict parents end up lashing out in the future. That's what happens. You start restricting people aren't allowed to be themselves, and eventually they find themselves in a dark place, and you find the dark version of themselves. So if you give everybody a voice, that's better. I mean, and you think about, heck, you could go even to like our workforce right now. The whole schooling system that we have, public schooling, was basically created to train people to work in factories and be drones. And people have lost their ability to be themselves and express themselves. And you lose a lot of that ingenuity. You lose a lot of what people truly have to offer in the world by forcing them down this pathway. And if you do that on social media, you're going to force people to go down a certain pathway. And then eventually they're going to be like, this pathway is not for me. And they're going to lash out and do something drastic, like we see happen all the time.
Right. Yeah, no, you bring up a lot of great points, and it's so true. It's like, by doing that, you invoke the opposite of what you want. Like, you're just pushing people away from you, and this is just, we didn't tell you guys, episode 8 was going to be super philosophical. But yeah, this is what happens. And this is how we've gotten to this point where everyone is an extreme on one end or the other. It's just so polarized because of this, because there is no moderation and just discussion of ideas. It's like one camp and the other camp. There's no discourse.
No, it drives me nuts. And like Elon said, he goes, you have true freedom of speech when somebody who you don't like is allowed to say something you don't like. That's exactly it. That's what you need to have, because if you don't allow that to happen, you're just going to be like, all right, now you are who I think you are. I mean, that's literally, that's racism. That is, completely doing that and saying, you are a person I don't like, you're bad, stay away from me. No, it's about acceptance. Even if you can accept the fact that I don't like you and I don't like what you have to say, but I'm still going to allow you to say it and be who you are, that's fine. Just accepting that, accept that you may not like that person, accept that you might not like what they have to say, but accept the fact that true freedom is to allow them to be who they are. But when you
Right.
start dictating who people are allowed to be, you lose a lot of life.
Right. You don't have to agree. And it's like, you let people speak their mind. And then, if they're saying crazy stuff, you could just say, okay, that person's a little nutty, where they're going to naturally, natural selection kind of fade out of society. But the alternative, what we do now is worse, I think, because now you don't know what anyone actually thinks. And again, like we said, like you're pushing people away, you're creating this polarization, which at the end of the day, very unhealthy, for democracy. And obviously, I think this is why this is such a big issue to Elon, because he doesn't just do things for no reason. People, it's hilarious. I was watching like a CNN clip earlier. I was like, let me hear what they're saying, their take on Elon doing this. And don't worry, down the line, I gotta use Fox News as a punching bag too. Someone could send me like a Mitt Romney saying Tesla's gonna fail clip or something. We want to keep it a bipartisan roast here, but they just were completely off the mark. Saying like what I said, that this is about monetary and control. He's a billionaire trying to control everything. And it just blows my mind. But if we go to some of this crazy stuff here, it was actually really interesting. I've kind of been following later today this Twitter saga unfolding here. Do you see the screen?
Oh, yeah.
So now there's stuff. This is really interesting. Goldman Sachs basically is helping Twitter, advising them. And they're basically saying Elon's offer is too low at $54.20 or $54.20 per share. And then this comes out that Goldman Sachs price target for Twitter is $30 or $37 with downside of 20%. And now they're playing games saying that, oh, Twitter's actually worth double that. So it's just a complete joke. And then there was some other interesting stuff about, there's like all this stuff with the Saudis are involved too.
Oh, you go up a little bit. I just missed it. I just saw it. Let me see. Right below this, I think I saw some of it.
Oh, yeah. I think it was this one.
And yeah, there you go.
And then a lot of people are, replying like they have a lot of money invested. There were definitely more tweets. I think they've been deleted just from both sides here. But yeah, they have a very big interest, I think, because they're invested heavily in Twitter, and there's a lot of conspiracies being thrown around in there. But it looks like, I think the tweets I was talking about got deleted, or actually this might be one of them. Yeah. So they're saying, how much of Twitter, Elon asked, does the kingdom own, directly and indirectly? What are the kingdom's views on journalistic freedom of speech? Yikes on that one. Definitely not a good look, and it's blowing up here. And then, there's just a whole bunch of crazy stuff because the Saudi, this kingdom investment fund came out and said that they don't think that Elon acquiring Twitter, he's not paying what it's worth more, blah, blah, blah. So they clearly have other interests here too, but
yeah,
very interesting to follow.
I say, and as we know, the Saudis definitely have a monetary interest in this. And, Elon, from his TED Talk says everything he does is literal, because from the autism that he has, he only is literal. That's what he is. He doesn't, it took him a while to learn, people when they have other meanings to things. So that's not how his brain works. So he literally just wants this to be what it is. So when he says something, he literally means it. He's not a person who lies, because that's not how his brain works. And so he's like, I'm not in this for monetary gain, because if he was, he would have bought all that stock and he would have sold it right after it jumped up 25%. There's your monetary gain.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but that's not what he's in this for. And the amount of people who go out there, and anytime I hear somebody, say something about, how he's doing something opposite with CNN, I'm like, he just listen to what he says. He says, and he means what he says, because that's how his brain works. So when you tell me this, that tells me that you're just full of crap and you're in this for your own gains of any sort. And you don't like the fact that he's not.
I think also, unfortunately, and then definitely gotta get to the TED Talk that he did today. I think it's just unfortunate that the majority of the population is just, I don't want to say brainwashed, but has a specific view of things, because like the majority of people like us are not like Tesla obsessed and like actually, you know, getting into the nitty gritty here. Because if I was just watching the news and that was my only, you know, knowledge of Elon Musk, I would be going along with it. Like, oh, like, why is this guy? But like, because I understand, like, exactly what you said, he's literal and like, he's not doing this for monetary gain. I mean, the guy has no need for more money, obviously. And then you just look at all of the good things he's done. You know, this is what we need is, you know, you have to reward people. He's created tens, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs. He has single-handedly restored the space program. We have not been to the moon in 50 years almost. Actually, no, over what, 69, I think, around 50 years. Okay, he single-handedly brought back space travel. He's single-handedly, you know, fast track the advent of sustainability, Tesla's goal of electrifying, you know, not only vehicles now, but, you know, our entire infrastructure. We're at the very beginning, you know, finally. And like, so you have a person who's done all this good. I mean, that's just how capitalism works. You're going to reward them based on the, you know, wealth and whatever they, not the wealth, like the prosperity that they created. Same thing with Jeff Bezos and Amazon. He made all his money, well, because so that you can get cheap goods shipped to your house within 2 hours and it's at your doorstep. You want an eagle's beak and a sledgehammer, it's at your door and it's cheaper than you'd pay at the, you know, the store. So like, these people don't just get their money from nothing, and it just blows my mind. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here.
Oh no, but you're right. It's like they view it as, oh, you know, these billionaires are the only ones who have gained from this. It's like, no, all of society has gained from this significantly. And with Tesla, it's going to be even more significant in the future. And, you know, and Elon, you know, yes, his initial goal for Tesla was, you know, full self-sustainable energy for the world. But, you know, it's kind of evolved, I think, into more of a, you know, betterment and an improvement of humanity in the future. And so everything he's doing is now geared towards that, you know, and pushing us to another planet. And when it comes to freedom of speech, because, you know, there's the social aspect of it all. And now he's doing that same exact philosophy when it comes to the social aspect.
Right. And yeah, that's another thing they've been harping on in the news is like, you know, during the past few years, Elon, Bezos, like added however many trillions to their wealth, and like everything is their fault. That's why we're in inflation now, and that's why there's a war in Ukraine. It's just like comical, honestly. Like they just try and pin everything on it. And it's like, I just don't understand. Like they didn't just inherit this money. They built this from the ground up and they've changed millions of lives for the better, hundreds of millions of lives. Like I arguably with Tesla and, you know, creating a sustainable future, 8 billion people on earth are benefiting from the work he's doing. So he deserves to be rewarded accordingly. Like that's just how life works under capitalism, at least. You know, if you believe in socialism, maybe it's a different story.
Oh yeah, I mean, and you think about, you know, how many lives they've touched. These guys have realistically affected in a positive manner more lives than any government on the planet. So, you know, they've got that. And then one of the things that Elon did mention in the TED Talk, you know, in one of the books he was reading was the answer isn't the hard part, it's the question. And it's one of the things I teach my son all the time is question everything. Even me, you know, question me as your father. I'm like, that's it. You have to question everything. So even with me, yes, I'm a huge Elon fan. I love the guy, but I still question the guy. I still question everything. And this is why it's gotten me to the point where my views on the government and media are the way they are, because I have questioned things and their logic does not coincide with each other. They're constantly contradicting themselves. They're very hypocritical. Like when I watch Elon, like he's not. He is what he is. He admits when he's wrong. You know, he's like, I don't know everything. And I'm like, all right, so this is a guy I want to get behind. Obviously, he's not perfect and he's got his flaws. We all do. I'm like, but he's genuine. And that to me is what draws me to him, is the fact that he's a genuine guy and genuinely means well for all of humanity. So when it comes to everybody else, I'm like, no. And that's why you got to question. And so everybody else who's like, you know, Elon's a bad guy, I'm like, question it. Why? Why is he a bad guy? Is it because somebody else told you that he's a bad guy? Or is it because you have seen it yourself that he's a bad guy?
Definitely all great points. And it's so true. I mean, you have to question everything. You know, that's the healthiest way to go about it. And like, that's the only way you learn, because yeah, otherwise you fall under the spell here. And like you said, he's come out and says, like, he keeps it real with everyone. He's been wrong a lot of times. He hasn't always been right. And that was one of the things they discussed in the TED Talk. His deadlines that he's created, they've missed a lot of them. They seem to always get to it eventually, which I think is just setting the bar high, and you're going to get further than you ever would have. But people say, oh, like, he doesn't meet his timelines, he's a snake oil salesman, but they always hit on what they say they're going to do. It just might take a few extra years, because that's just life. I mean, he's looking at it also through a perfect lens. Like, building the Gigafactory in Berlin is the perfect example. Realistically, without all that political nonsense and the building permits and the protesters dragging it on, he probably could have built that factory just like the Shanghai one in under a year. Instead, it dragged out for 2 years because of all the bureaucratic stuff. So when he's thinking of these timelines, I think that he's looking at it in that perfect world. We could do this in 8 months and we'll be ready to go. But the reality is, all these problems arise. So it kind of, makes it take longer. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's great to set the bar high.
Yeah. And I think for him, that's probably internally, probably one of the most frustrating things for him is he is so genuine and sees us going in this direction to better humanity. And he's always questioning, why isn't everybody else thinking this exact same way? Because if everybody had the same vision that he did, we would hit these timelines. It wouldn't even be a question. Because, you go to the Giga Berlin and you wouldn't have people questioning the trees and the snails and the snakes and whatever it is. It's like, no, it's okay. This is what's going to be the best for humanity. We're going to do it. And of course, as we said, questioning everything is good. So there's nothing wrong with people questioning that. But when you question it, you've got to also realize, both sides of the coin and see the bigger picture. Because if you're worrying about the snakes in the ground and you're like, oh, well, in 100 years from now, if we don't build this factory, we're all going to be gone, including the snakes.
It becomes comical, and I'm laughing over here because it made me think of, there's an amazing clip I'm sure you've seen when they questioned him. He's Elon standing outside the Gigafactory Berlin factory, and one of the big dramas was about water. They were afraid that this factory was going to use up too much water and be detrimental to the environment. And there's a clip, it was like a news interview, that Elon gets asked the question, about the water, and he just breaks down laughing. Like, he's laughing hysterically. He's like, is this a joke? And it's so true, like you just said. If we don't fix these problems, there's going to be no snakes, no water, no humans in 100 years. But like, you get caught up on all this nonsense.
Oh yeah, yeah, and and again, going back to political hypocrisy, there are other factories over there that are older factories that use significantly more water than this factory is going to use. So why is it okay for them to do it but not Tesla?
It blows your mind, and it's actually so frustrating. Like, once you, like you said, and all you have to do is question everything, and you would have gotten to this point, at some point, like, is Elon bad? Why? What did he actually do? You start looking into all this stuff, and you just start to see it all, like the house of cards just implodes. And it's like,
oh yeah,
I mean, this is my opinion, but I think I have the right view of it, and on Elon as being a genuine person. Like you said, like, he kind of literally cannot lie. Like, he's just brutally honest. And it's like, well, isn't that what you want? Or do you want to, someone who's going to hide things and be fake and give you, some BS timelines?
Yeah. And unfortunately, that is true, because some people that's a whole different conversation that we can have going into that.
Yeah. So they asked him about AI and full self-driving. And this, I thought, was one of the most interesting parts. Great interview overall. But, he basically said about the AI and the full self-driving, people have no idea this is going to be bigger than the car.
Yes, and obviously it's something we've talked about. Dave Lee has his whole model built out with Tesla bots being huge, and Elon said it himself. Tesla bots are basically going to take over labor. And my video for tomorrow that I just recorded, I discussed it, and I'm like, thinking about, I did a search on how much labor market is. And the labor market right now is about $94 trillion. And the automotive market's about $2 trillion. So that's a 50x, and we're limited because we only have a limited number of humans. So when you start looking at a 50x above where the automotive market is, but the Tesla bot market can realistically be infinite, you now have an infinite market, a total addressable market of infinity versus 3 trillion. So you tell me how much bigger that's going to be. Yeah. And people don't get it, because A lot of people, it's a lot of belief. We haven't seen AI get solved yet. We haven't seen even FSD in cars be completely solved yet. So now people are like, all right, now we're getting into futuristic sci-fi stuff. Is this actually going to become reality? But then you can go back and look at movies from the 80s and 90s, and a lot of the stuff that was sci-fi back then is reality now. And so it's just a matter of time that we're going to get there. And Elon, being the genuine good guy he is, wants to get there before somebody else who could be using it in an evil manner. So he wants to make sure that they're the first ones to solve it. What I loved was he actually put some better timelines on what he was talking about. So seems like, his FSD solving for the end of the year was much less of we're going to have FSD fully solved. Now it's more of we're going to have it safer than human driving solved. And then within the next 2 years, he did say probably a prototype this year for Optimus. And then next year, probably within 2 years, they're going to have a realistic production of Optimus coming out on a basic level. So even if it's 2024, that means that they'll have AI solved by 2024 based on his plans and timeline. So that's even a lot earlier than I thought. I was thinking probably the late 2020s that we would have AI solved. But, that's why he pushes for FSD and Optimus for this year, because they kind of go hand in hand, and as he said in the interview, what's the difference between, general artificial intelligence in a car on 4 wheels versus one in a humanoid robot on 2 legs? It's slightly different AI, just real world AI, because you've got to be walking around versus driving on roads. But it realistically isn't much different, and you're going to be using the same technology to learn and advance it.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, those are all great points. And just going back to, you said like he's giving better, timelines now. You know what it is? It's he's behaving less as that genuine like person, and he's learning how to be a CEO. And it's also same like being a politician. Like he's learning, what he's supposed to say. Like, oh, okay, Wall Street will like this, like being more, realistic with everything. And then yeah, the mass scale thing is wild. I mean, there's a lot we could get into with that. And I was just reading some stuff, in this book Insane Mode about how just from full self-driving, the jobs that is going to offset, you're going to get to the point where you may need universal basic income, because I mean, we AI definitely eventually, I think it's getting to that point. I don't think we're quite there yet, but there's a lot there. And then yeah, kind of going back to that's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, bear argument I think against Tesla. And I have been thinking about that more lately, that okay, they're saying they're going to do all these things in the future. Are they, actually going to do it? Because that's obviously, once we're there is a completely different story. They could say anything. And that's something I've been thinking about, but there's a lot of things that reassure me. One, like you said, it might sound silly, but literally those science fiction movies, like that's what Elon was watching and reading all about. That's how he got to the point he is. He's talking about this in the TED Talk, all the books he read about like sci-fi and whatever else. And all of a sudden, you think it's possible, and it can be, anything's possible that obeys the laws of physics, which, big physics guy too. But you just look at Tesla's track record, and everything that they said they were going to do, that everyone said was impossible, they did. Start a car company, impossible. Okay. Start an EV company that's successful. Okay. Sell 500,000 cars a year, never going to happen. Sell 1 million cars a year, never going to happen. They just keep beating anyone's expectations. And I think while this whole full self-driving and AI stuff is a whole nother dimension, if you look at the FSD videos that are out there, not the Taylor Ogan, Dan O'Dowd, FUD, but like literally go on YouTube and just type in, Tesla full self-driving videos, like whole Mars catalog posts a lot. It is actually mind-blowing. Like it's incredible. And you can see the improvement. It's not even on a scale of every year it gets incrementally better. Every month, maybe even every week, with however often they're doing these updates, like monthly, you can see incredible improvement. So that's another thing that reassures me. And I know this is something that Chicken Genius Singapore had said in one of his last videos, RIP his YouTube channel, that's one of the things he needs to see, is that full self-driving, for his like bull thesis to remain intact, full self-driving has to continuously improve. He has to see that it's improving, because that's what makes me excited, is that full self-driving is not just some crazy fantasy idea that's off in the distance. We're watching it get better right now in real time. I mean, just from a year ago, it's incredible. It's like leaped, like tens of years this would have taken a normal company. And it's just learning so quickly. And then it all starts to make sense. This is an AI, a neural network. It operates basically like a human. It has vision. So once everything is like plugged in and they, work out all the little tweaks, I mean, it's on par with a human. And he talked about this in the TED Talk too, that this is the way the highways are designed. You need vision because they're designed for human eyes to see and react. That's why a lot of these other things like LiDAR are not ideal. They've hit on everything in their track record, and the fact that you can see it continuously improving, I think, is like the only, for me, it's the evidence I need. Obviously it would be entirely different if they were saying still, this is what we're going to do in 10 years and they had nothing today, but it's getting better quickly.
Yeah. I mean, and you brought up a good point and put a light bulb off in my head. It's no different than having a baby. You have a baby, you're not giving birth to a full-grown adult that knows everything. You have a baby, it's going to have a learning curve. And until the day you die, you are going to continue growing and learning. That's how it goes. So there's really no difference in this. It's, even when you look at products, the refrigerator was invented. Well, awesome. But it's not like the fridge was invented and that was it. It's improved every single year forever since it was invented. That's how this is going to work. And eventually they'll get to a point where they do have it solved, but it's not like they're going to stop there. They will also continue to improve it on top of that. And it's just going to keep on going forever. And then you put it into an Optimus bot, and guess what? Those are also going to improve. And there's going to be even more that can get improved on top of that going forward.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like a digital baby is essentially what it is. I mean, we're going into the metaverse.
Yeah, Tamagotchis now.
This is like the Twilight Zone, but it's so true. It's the same thing. Like it's never gonna. It's only gonna improve. Like you're teaching it, and like, okay, last update, it couldn't detect this thing in the road with the neural network and stuff. Okay, this update they patched that. So like they taught it something new, and it's retaining everything, so it can only improve. And it's crazy that like where it is today, already to me, I think is better than a human being in many scenarios. When what are humans doing on, the car, driving, like texting on their phone, distracted with whatever. I mean, it's definitely past that point already. I mean, these things, I think they took one from California to New York, and it basically needed like little to no intervention. I mean, it's incredible.
Oh, I know. And I mean, think about like when you start a new job. You're a grown adult and you still have learning curves that you have to go through and you still have to figure things out. It's the same exact premise behind this. And when you're talking about neural nets, that's really like human brain in a machine. And so it's going to have to go through the same learning curves that all of us do. And you don't have, like I said, you don't have a baby that comes out and you're like, when are you getting a job? You ask your kid, when are you getting a job? Well, when is FSD going to get solved? Well, FSD is going to get solved when your kid gets a job. I don't know. I mean,
that's a great point. And yet the FSD neural net is learning much faster than us humans do. That's for sure, which is insane. Yeah. And another thing you had said earlier was, this is another bear argument. So that's probably the biggest one, because at this point, so much of the company is just centered around FSD, at least from a public perception. I think we know that there's a lot more going on, but this is a big proponent. If FSD is going to make or break their valuation, but the fact that the FSD is getting better, and then so that we kind of covered that. The second biggest bear argument, I would say, is it's only a matter of time until all these legacy companies catch up, which I don't think is going to happen either. Like you said, Tesla is committed to this continuous improvement. It is ingrained in the company culture. So if you're on a track and you're racing Usain Bolt and he's 5 laps ahead of you, you can't catch him. I mean, he's not going to stop and wait. Tesla's not going to stop and stand still and wait for him to catch up. They're going to continue to get better and better. Even silly little things like the Cybertruck, he's saying now, you don't even need, it'll just know when you're there. It doesn't need door handles. It'll open automatically. Like, this is the crazy little things that they're going to keep doing to just stay ahead of the competition. And obviously, that's on the lower end of importance to me. I mean, that's really cool. But like, their battery technology is going to get better. Their range is going to get better. The competition might be able to do what Tesla's doing now in 5 years, but what's Tesla going to be doing in 5 years from now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's like the tortoise and the hare, but Tesla being the hare isn't stopping like it does in the stories. It's just going to keep going. And yeah, like you said, legacy auto and other manufacturers are working on technology that is going to meet where Tesla is now. Well, that's great if Tesla doesn't make any more progress, but they're already at the 4680 structural packs, which nobody else has. And then you even hear stories about, was it Toyota, I think, is it no Toyota or Honda, or one of those has a solid state battery, or maybe it's Nissan, has a solid state battery that they're working on. I'm like, oh, one of my subscribers had mentioned that in the comments. And I'm like, well, that's cool. So I took a look into it, and even their article said they're not at the point of scaling or real production yet, and probably for 2027 they would have it. And I'm like, well, that's great, but when you look at mass scaling, we're looking at probably the 2024 to 2026 window where EVs are really going to start, ellipsing over the ICE vehicles. Well, at that point, it's going to come down to who is producing the most vehicles. Is it going to be ICE or EVs getting produced the most? Seeing as regulations are taking us away from ICE, it's stupid for Legacy to be producing ICE at that scale at that time. So EVs are being what's taking over. So I realistically can see Tesla this year, and I mentioned it in my video this morning, talking about the scale that Tesla's going at, and when we're in a place of inflation, where do you invest your money? And you don't know where to invest your money because there's no real safe place to put it. But if you can invest it in a place that gives you cash flow, that is a phenomenal place to put it. Well, where can Tesla invest the money to get cash flow? Building factories. So if Tesla's going to invest in factories, I can realistically see them putting up 5, maybe 6 factories in the next 3 years. Because if they're investing all of that money now, they'll get to the point where they're producing. So they're going to hit 2025. They might be pushing out 10 million vehicles a year way faster than anybody else can possibly fathom, way ahead of where even I think they're going to be at. So imagine if they put up 5 more factories by 2024, by 2025, 2026, they could realistically be putting out 10 million vehicles a year, and nobody's even going to be close to that scale.
Yeah, definitely agree. And it goes back to, what you're saying, like the competition, if you can even call it that, selling 10,000 EVs or 400 in the case of GM is not competition. You are a cockroach that is going to be stomped. Selling 10,000 is still not. 100,000 is still not. You have to be selling in the millions. And Tesla's getting to the point where I could see them double production this year and get to 2 million. You add some more volume production of those factories and new locations, easily doubles again to 4 million. And the other thing is cost. The competitors that are selling 10,000 or 100,000 or however many cars are selling them at a higher cost and making worse margins. They're barely breaking a profit, which doesn't translate to, especially if you already have a lot of debt. You can't do that and build these new factories because they cost you $1-2 billion. So now you have to take out more debt. And the way things stand today, and like we said, like with this continuous improvement from Tesla, that's the way I see it, is they just have the highest probability than any of the alternatives because they're already proving they can do it. They have the recipe now. Everyone else is at the starting line. Tesla obviously is a 10-year head start, more if you want to go all the way back to the beginning. But all they have to do is they've got the secret sauce. They just need to keep following the same recipe. They know what works, and I could realistically see them just put up a second factory at Giga Texas, at Shanghai, which they're already talking about. I think maybe started, because it might make the most sense. I mean, those work so well, and those are central locations that that could even help them fast track it even further.
Oh yeah, and I mean, obviously Elon did say for logistical purposes, it's better to have them in more places. So he's already thinking about this. They're already working on it. And think about even as fast as Tesla is, it's been 2 years since the Model Y was released, and they still haven't even produced 1 million Model Ys. So you think about all these other manufacturers out there who want to, put out 20 different models of a vehicle. How long is it going to take before they can actually produce 1 million of that one vehicle? Even if they went at Tesla's pace, it's going to take them at least 2 years to produce 1 million of them. And in 2 years, Tesla's going to be producing 5 million of them.
Yeah.
So there's just no way, like I said with Usain Bolt, there's just no way they can catch up unless they all have these secret factories that are already up and running that nobody knows about at full scale that they're just going to unleash on the world. There's no possible way.
They've been doing a really good job hiding it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, getting to volume production, like Elon was talking about this again on the TED Talk today. That's the hard part. Anyone can make a prototype or even small scale, for a niche market. Getting to volume production is the hardest part. So all these companies are not even at that yet. I mean, that's what almost bankrupted Tesla.
Yeah.
It's easy to do it on a small scale. Anyone can do that, but getting that volume production is nearly like almost impossible. I mean, if Tesla running such a light operation, fully devoted to it, could barely make it, how is someone with no money or heavily indebted with an ice business that they have to cannibalize going to do it? And then you tie that in with, what are these companies' timelines? They want to be 50%, of the legacy ones, 50% electric by 2025, 2030, 2035. 50%. I mean, how much of the market share is Tesla going to have gobbled up by then? They don't have competition today. Like, people say that, I've been hearing the competition is coming for 5 years. Building 10,000 cars, it's not competition. When they are selling 1 million and 2 million vehicles, then it's competition. And even then, like we said, there's 1% market penetration for EVs. There's plenty of room for everyone to grow, and Tesla will have the best profit margins and possibly FSD and all the other stuff by then.
Oh yeah, and like I said, there is no other manufacturer right now that has even hit the hard part. They haven't gotten to the hard part, and so let's see how they handle the hard part. And yes, you can say Legacy Auto knows what it's like to scale vehicles, but do they really? Because all of their companies scaled their vehicles to where they are decades ago. They didn't have to. Nobody who works in that company knows actually what it's like to scale. They came into their positions with the company already at scale. So none of them know what it's like to go through that. And it's going to be definitely a learning curve. I mean, I want to see Mary Barra sleeping on the floor of the factories for 3 years. Let's see that happen.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is like, I don't know that there's another CEO or just a team out there that is going to do that. That's what it took to keep them, stave off bankruptcy. And yeah, no one else out there is that committed. And they're all, a lot of, it'll be interesting to see, like, obviously a lot of Elon's, incentives are tied to performance and tied to getting, Tesla to a certain place, and he's getting paid basically in all stock. How are all these legacy CEOs doing? I'm sure they're getting paid 30 million a year. The performance is definitely not like it was, at least for Elon in the earlier days, where it was make or break. He had all his money tied up in it. And it's like, it puts you in that do or die situation. And I think that's another huge strength of it, is that, when you are in a corner like that, you're going to, like, through sheer desperation, just, he figured it out. If he had gotten billions and billions of funding, like a lot of these other companies do, a lot of these other EV startups, let's say, that are starting out with 10 billion valuation, whatever, they're going to become a little more complacent, and more oftentimes than not, they tend to fail. And that's another thing that I think is really interesting. You look at all the biggest companies in the world right now. Where did Apple start? In a garage. Where did Amazon start? In like a tiny office. They didn't start with a $10 billion valuation, all these outside investors. I mean, that is just a recipe for failure, basically every IPO. And I think you put Tesla in that category too. They literally built this company from scratch.
Oh yeah, and I mean, you look at Elon, he's working without a safety net because he gets paid in all stock. Everything he does is, if he fails, if the company fails, he fails, he's gone. He has no safety net. So that 3 years he was clinging on to the Model 3 there, he was literally hanging on to the cliff edge. And if the company failed, he was done. He doesn't have that safety net of, billions or millions of dollars coming in a paycheck on a yearly basis. He doesn't have that. Where all these other companies, like I said, they're complacent. They don't have to worry about that. When it comes to Legacy Auto, maybe I could see like a Herbert Diess or a Jim Farley would be a little bit more in. Even they don't have the same buy-in as Elon does, but at least they see and have a similar type of vision and work ethic towards it. But even so, they've got that safety net. They have that money that is in their back pockets, where if the company failed, they'd be like, you know what, it stinks, but I'm still okay. And it's like, Elon doesn't have that. Elon has one vision. And for him, I don't even think it's about money. That's the craziest part. He's the wealthiest man in the world who honestly doesn't care about the money, but he is utilizing it in a manner to help the world even more. Why would he buy Twitter? He's not buying Twitter for monetary gain. He's not buying it for power. He's buying it so that other people can have a better life in the future.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Sorry about the doggos there. Got to bark at everything. But I was going to ask, as far as competition goes, who do you think is the biggest threat to Tesla? You mentioned Dees and VW. I could see them. I think it's them and the Chinese EVs. No one else is
Yeah.
coming close at this point. And Volkswagen, they'll probably pose, put up a good fight. But again, they're so far behind. And if what we said is, correct, that multiple companies, if the reality is, which it's looking more and more like, let's say 5 years from now, Tesla's going to sell 5 million cars. I think it'll be way more than that. But let's just say, for argument's sake, Tesla's selling 5 million, and VW, by some miracle, they must have the magic beans caught up and they're selling 5 million cars too. So most of the other competitors are going to be way behind that. I mean, maybe the Chinese EVs could pose a threat, but if we're looking at, like, the legacy companies, so even at that point, there's enough money to go around. The EV market is only growing. I mean, the car market, I think, is around 70 million per year, and the entire world fleet basically gets recycled every 20 years. So there's like endless runway for growth. I mean, no one is taking that whole market anytime soon, and that's like optimistic for the competition. Even if they're selling 1 million or 2 million by then, I mean, I still think Tesla will have the lead.
Oh yeah, and like definitely VW, and I think so. When it comes to Tesla and Elon wants everyone. He said it in the TED Talk today. When it comes to getting to the world to 300 terawatts of battery storage, they want to have a significant portion of that, but they can't do it all themselves. So they have to encourage others to do it as well. And so the same thing when it comes to EVs. Elon's not saying nobody else do it, we don't want competition. He wants competition. He wants to see everyone else producing it. So I have no doubt, when Herbert Diess reached out to him, of course Elon's going to help. He wants the whole world to go that way. And if, the largest vehicle producer in the world is going to jump on board with this, of course Elon's going to support that. So yeah, I definitely think VW has a good chance. I honestly think Ford is in a great place because of the fact that they have not been doing as well with ICE vehicles. Their business has been shrinking over the years. So they're not a leader by any stretch of the imagination, unless you're talking about the truck industry.
Yeah, it's almost like, they could capture just that F-150 market with the F-150 Lightning, which, that's they have much less cars. That's another thing that I think is really interesting. And I agree, like Ford could realistically just do the F-150 Lightning and make enough money to, be relevant, because that's the best-selling car or truck in America, or best-selling car overall. I think actually it's definitely up there. And you compare that to someone like GM, who's talking about doing 30, 40 models by 2030. I mean, it took Tesla this long to do 4 models. So what does that mean? Can you build multiple of those different cars at one factory? I mean, Tesla so far at most has been able to do 4 different cars at a factory, S3, X, and Y. So I actually have to look into, like, what does that mean logistically? Do you need one factory to produce, let's say, every 4 cars? I mean, I don't see how else you do it, especially with them and having all types of different parts in them, whereas the Teslas are becoming more and more, the same material they can use for each one, and same shapes and whatnot. So what does that mean? If you can do 4 cars per factory, are they going to need to build 8, gigafactory size factories? And how are they going to do that? Like, that's not going to happen. That's going to take 20 plus years if they were to build, one every 2 years, let's say, like Tesla.
Right. And then when you're looking at profitability, you go to economies of scale. None of these are going to be at a point where they're pushing out enough of those vehicles to offset that. So you're not going to have that economy of scale. You're not going to have that huge profit margin because you're producing more and more of the same vehicle. And like you said, it's so much more of an inefficient business. They're trying to make EVs run like their ICE business, and their ICE business isn't doing all that well. So you can't work it that way. They're just turning an ICE business that is inefficient into an EV business that is going to be just as inefficient.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, a startling point for the competition. But and it just brings me back to the iPhone. Tesla is the company that has come the closest. Well, I think they're going to surpass Apple one day, but let's say realistically today, they're the closest that we've gotten to like another Apple-esque product. They have the same following, and there's one iPhone, and it's one new one every year. And at the end of the day, Apple could make all their money off the iPhone, nothing else, and go away. I feel like Tesla is getting into a similar sphere playing field here. And so then when you look at it like that, okay, so now these 40 different EVs are irrelevant. Everyone just wants the one that's the best or the most trendy, whatever. Like there's multiple reasons why iPhones are so successful. I mean, Apple's got a lot of similarities to Tesla. They have the proprietary technology. They have that great branding, the economy of scale. I mean, it's the spitting image of Tesla. And so you look at that way, maybe Tesla can produce one vehicle, at least, in the beginning, and it be the best and have that iPhone-esque, quality and, aurora around it. And that's all they need. And now the competition, like you said, that's perfectly said. Like they're trying to just do what they do with ICE with EVs, but the game is changing. The playing field is changing. Those cars are going to be the equivalents to the Blackberries and the Nokias. No one's going to want that when you can have the iPhone, which is going to be Tesla.
Oh yeah. And, and at least Ford and VW did say, you know what, we've got to do this. We have to start from scratch. We can't do things the way we've always done it. So they got a chance, but they're starting now. Tesla started 10 years ago. So, and even if you go back to, the factories or how Elon finally figured it out. So even if you say they've only been doing it for 5 years at the way they're doing it now, it took them 3 years to figure out, okay, Austin is now the best way to do it. Took a lot. So even if the competition sees what they are doing in their plans and they start to adopt the same way, it's still going to take them at least 2 years to get these factories up and running at the minimum. And then they have to scale them. So, you're still looking at 4 years before they are getting it themselves to that point of where Tesla is now.
And that's, again, yeah, and assuming that they have this magic recipe for a product that's, going to compete with Tesla. They've been hiding it so well. They're going to be able to do it the bureaucratic union way that they're going to have to go through, which makes everything take longer. So where Tesla builds a factory in 1 to 2 years, maybe it takes them even longer. And all this does, the longer that goes on, the more it benefits to Tesla. It's actually crazy. Like the more I think about it and reading that Insane Mode book, maybe we got to get a Tesla bear on here to debate us, but it's very, that would be fun. Did you have anything else you wanted to get to?
So the only thing, and I'm going to go back to where you had mentioned Apple, and I mentioned it in my video for tomorrow because it was about mass scaling. Apple has their main product, the iPhone, and the iPads and the laptops and the computers. And then they have the accessories that go along with it to add extra margin. Tesla, we currently view as an EV company. They're really going to be an energy company. So their energy business is realistically going to be like the iPhone. And the EVs are going to be the accessories that go along with the iPhone. So think about the EV market right now and how that's what we think is the meat and potatoes, when in reality, in the future, that's going to be the accessories to go along with the energy. And then the Tesla bots are what are going to be producing all of it. Mind-blowing.
It is mind-blowing. And even if we take the Tesla bot out of the equation, we just look at what we have today, like you just said. So all these companies are catching up. They're going to have, let's say in 2025, every company on earth has an EV that is in equal, price and, quality performance as a Tesla. Okay, fine. But are they going to have the solar panels and the full house system with the battery pack to sell with it? That's so true. Like they have all these other products that they're also way ahead that no one else is doing. Some people are, the closest thing is with the FSD, the autonomous driving, which I think they're years behind still. But you company in all those things. So what's that going to do? Add more profit to Tesla's bottom line. And they have all these products that no one else can even hope to, make and compete with, because that's 10 years down the road, let's say, or 5 years. It's just going to take longer than doing the actual electric vehicles are, because they have nothing as far as that infrastructure. So then what happens? Tesla has more money. And what are they going to do? They have to like royally screw up, because if you have the most money to pump back in to R&D and just keep advancing, keep getting that, continuous improvement in the company that, like we said, is just, that is what Tesla's all about. It's, a Silicon Valley company, meets auto. Those two don't usually mix well. And that's where you're seeing a lot of these problems. It's interesting. There's a lot in the book about, some of the problems VW faced, where they tried to do what Tesla did, but they're kind of caught up in the bureaucratic way and doing things a tried and tested way. It also ties in, there's a great SpaceX documentary that just came out on Netflix. And they said how SpaceX and Tesla, obviously very similar culture. SpaceX philosophy is, we're going to break stuff and we're going to figure out what went wrong, and it enables that continuous improvement. Whereas other companies are competing against, Boeing and the traditional ones, they don't launch anything until it's like 150%, everything's fine. They never like purposely break stuff. Just one example of that continuous improvement that's always at play, because it's just a company with innovation at its heart. Whereas auto, they want to follow the playbook, the legacy auto players. They want to, like you said, just do what they're doing with ICE and transition that to EVs, and it's all going to be the same. And they're in for a rude awakening.
Oh yeah.
I think that's a good place to wrap up, unless you had anything else.
No, I am good to go. Today was an exciting day.
This was a good one. I like that. Well, you can all follow me on Twitter at Invest with Vinny, and follow Tim at Oracle Tim1, and I'll link to his channel down below. Thank you all for watching. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, guys.